The National Mall. Introduction. The National Mall is a park in the center of the Washington, D.C., the United States Capitol building, where the Senate and the House of Representatives meet, stands as the head of the National Mall. The White House, where the president lives and works, looks over the mall. The National Mall is an important gathering place in our nation's capital. People watch the inauguration of the President of the United States from the mall. On the 4th of July, thousands of people come to see the mall to see amazing fireworks. The wide open spaces are a great places to celebrate special events. People also meet there to hold protests and rallies. The Capitol is where Congress meets and to make the nation's law. The National Mall is also a home to many important buildings. There are monuments, memorials, and museums. Heroes are honored with statues and plaques. The National Mall is a place where people can learn about the important people, places, and events in the American history. The National Mall. The Vietnam Veteran Memorial. The Museum of American History. Museum of Natural History. National Gallery of Art, Lincoln Memorial, World War II Memorial, Washington Monument, the Great Memorial, the Capitol, Arlington Memorial Bridge, Korean War Veterans Memorial, Fair Gallery, Museum of African Art, Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, Air and Space Museum, Museum and the American Indians, King Memorial, Roosevelt Memorial, Jefferson Memorial. Chapter 1. Honoring the Great. The Washington Monument is at the center of the National Mall. This is famous to landmarks. It's dedicated to George Washington. He helped America win independence from Britain. He was also an American's first president. The Washington Monument was built in two main places. 1848 to 1856 and 1872 to 1884. The obelisk is 555.5 feet tall. It was the tallest structure in Washington by law. Nothing is allowed to be taller. The construction of the Washington Monument began in 1448, but it stopped during the Civil War, and it finally completed in 1884. There were monuments to other great American presidents too. On the National Mall, the Lincoln Memorial is the west end of the mall. Abraham Lincoln was a president during the Civil War. He is famous for ending slavery in the United States. His memorial was built in the style of temples of ancient Greece. The Jefferson Memorial honors the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, drafted the Declaration of Independence. He also doubled the size of the United States by buying the land of the west of the Mississippi River. A 19-foot-tall statue of Lincoln sits in the center of the memorial. A statue of Jefferson stands inside this white marble memorial. Franklin Delano Roosevelt led the United States through the Great Depression and World War II. He started programs to help people who couldn't pay for food and housing. The Roosevelt Memorial is divided into 4 outdoor rooms, one for each term the president served. Roosevelt, the president from 1933 to 1945, is the only president to serve more than 2 terms. Up close, Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. Martin Luther King Jr. was a civil rights leader. He worked for equal opportunities and rights for African Americans. In 2011, a memorial to Dr. King was opened in the National Mall. It features a statue of King carved from a mountain of rock. This design was inspired by one of the King's speeches. In the speech, King talked about the stone of hope being carved from a mountain of despair. Ulysses St. Grant was a general in the American Civil War. He was skilled military leader, and he was honored on the mall with the massive sculptures. The central part of the memorial is a statue of Grant riding a horse. On one side of him is a statue of artillery group. On the other side, statue is a cavalry group. Grant was also 18th President of the United States. Ulysses Grant was made the commander of the Union Army in 1864. War memorials. The 56 columns of the World War II memorial represents on the 56 districts, states, and territories that made up the United States at that time. The War Memorial on the National War honor the people who served during wartime. The heart of the World War II memorial is a beautiful sunken pool. 56 columns surrounded the pool. There are two large arches that represent the victories in the Atlantic and the Pacific to the west. 4,048 gold stars decorate a curved wall. The stars represent more than 418 American soldiers who lost their lives. The Vietnam Women's Memorial shows two servicewomen helping an injured soldier. The Vietnam War, which ran from 1957 to 1975, was the longest war in which the United States have been involved. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial was completed in 1982. It was dedicated for more than 58,000 Americans who died or went missing in action during the Vietnam War. Their names are written in the memorial's wall. A statue honoring thousands of women who served in the war added in 1993. The Korean War Veterans Memorials honor the Americans who served the Korean War, which lasted from 1950 to 1953. 19 stone sculptures and soldiers are placed throughout the site. The figures look as they are emerging from the forest behind the memorial. About 2,500 images of people who served in the war have been etched into a wall of remembrance. These sculptures are the part of the Korean War Veterans Memorial. Chapter 3. Collecting American History. The Air and Space Museum have early airplanes and spacecrafts. Like monuments and war memorials, museums help people remember the past. The National Mall has a number of museums. Many of them are part of the Smithsonian Museum complex. At the Air and Space Museum, visitors can see the Wright brothers, the first plane. They can see the suits and the astronauts wore on the moon, and the Apollo 11 command module that carried them to the moon. The gowns worn by the First Ladies at the inaugural balls are displayed in the Museum of American History. There are traces with transportation history here too, with trains from 1800s and station wagon from the 1950s. Museum and art galleries give clues about other cultures. The Museum of African Art displays African masks, paintings, sculptures, textiles, ceramics, and craft. The Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden features a collection of sculptures. Many of the artworks have been given by the private citizens. The National Gallery of Art is displaying artworks from around the world. It also shows art by American artists. The Fleer Gallery is famous for its collection of Asian art. The gallery was started in Charles Langfrier, who built the railroad cars. He also collects artworks. The African elephant is a popular exhibit at the Museum of the Natural History. This sculpture by Rodin can be seen in the Hirshhorn and Museum and the Sculpture Garden. National Museum of American Indian. The National Museum of the American Indian was dedicated to the culture and history of Native Americans. It houses thousands of historic items, films, and photographs. The museum natural look represents the close ties that Native Americans have to the environment. Conclusion. The Arlington Memorial Bridge is a foot of the National Mall. It links to the mall to Arlington Cemetery. That is where many of the American heroes are buried. 2 American presidents, William Howard Taft and John F. Kennedy, are also buried there. The National Mall is the heart of Washington, D.C., in the nation. The National Mall is a place where every American can be proud. Visitors can see the Lincoln Memorial from the Arlington Bridge.